Ask the clerks to set the clock accordingly. Senator Fifield.
Mr Deputy President, what a tale of woe Labor's elusive search for a budget surplus have been, and I think the story of Labor's efforts to repair the budget really is a good encapsulation of this government. It tells you everything you need to know about this government, and there are really two things you need to know: a lack of competence and consistent breaches of faith with the Australian people. And that is what the budget bottom line represents. And, Mr Acting Deputy President, I'd ask you to cast your mind back to the very first budget of Treasurer Swan, the 2008-09 budget. And Treasurer Swan said, and I'm fond of quoting Treasurer Swan's 08-09 budget speech, Mr Acting Deputy President, but Mr Swan said, "We are budgeting for a surplus of $21.7 billion in 2008-2009. Let me just repeat that for you, Mr Acting Deputy President. Treasurer Swan said in his 08-09 budget speech, "We are budgeting for a surplus of $21.7 billion in 2008-2009, 1.8% of GDP, the largest budget surplus as a share of GDP in nearly a decade. This honours and exceeds the 1.5% target we set in January without relying on revenue windfalls." So what Treasurer Swan was basically saying in that budget speech was that Treasurer Costello, his 9 budget surpluses, the Howard government, they were basically a pack of easy beats, that their budget surpluses were pathetic, that he was going to go better. He was going to show what real fiscal manhood looks like. And he was going to demonstrate, exactly what that looks like. And he thought that a 1.5% target for a budget surplus, 1.5% of GDP, was really the measure of the individual as treasurer. So that's what he said. And here were we, a new opposition, thinking, who knew how pathetic we were? You know, we didn't know that you actually were meant to work harder. And in fact, Wayne Swan said it was actually a pretty easy thing to do, to get a bigger budget surplus than we had. So we thought, well, look, we'll just have to sit back and learn from the master how budgets really should be run. And I think all of Australia learned, as a result of the 08-09 budget, that what is in the budget speech, what is in the budget papers, when referencing a surplus, or a deficit for that matter, isn't actually an outcome. It's a forecast. It was now, of course, the Australian people got into the habit of assuming that a forecast in the budget was as good as gold, because when the Howard Costello government was in office, those forecasts were met and often exceeded in terms of the size of the budget surplus. So Australians had got into the habit of being able to rely on the figures in the budget speech on budget night. But the Australian people have learnt.
Order. Senators, please resume your seat. Senator Fifield. Senator Fifield is entitled to be heard in silence. Senator Fifield.
Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President. Australians have learnt through Swan budget after Swan budget after Swan budget that you cannot believe what Wayne says on budget night. Now, of course, we hear from the government time and again that actually they've been exceedingly unlucky. You know, you used to refer to someone who was lucky as having a Kylie, as in a Kylie Minogue. You know, lucky, lucky, lucky. I should be so lucky. Her song. Well, these guys, it's kind of like a reverse Kylie experience that these people have had. They've just been so unlucky. Firstly, it was the GFC. Now, yes, we recognise the GFC was a challenge. Then it was the European financial crisis that was the challenge. And we and the Australian people were meant to think that just because there have been external challenges that automatically you suffer a crisis of confidence in the domestic economy, that there are revenue write-downs in the domestic economy, in the budget, and that therefore it is nigh on impossible for a government to achieve budget balance. That is the scenario which has been presented to us year after year by this government. But if that were the case when the Asian financial crisis took place, which occurred during the period of the Howard Costello government, if that were the case, then there would have been a crisis of confidence, business confidence, consumer confidence and investor confidence in Australia at that time. Revenues would have plummeted and the budget would have gone into deep dark deficit and continued in deep dark deficit for years to come. That is what you would have expected to have happened there if you followed the government's logic. And you would have expected it to happen then even more so, because we are much more enmeshed in our region, in Asia, than we are with Europe, than we are with the United States, which was the genesis of the global financial crisis. So whatever happened to us as a result of the GFC and the European debt crisis, you would have expected to happen to us many times worse during the Asian financial crisis, but it didn't. And there are a couple of reasons why it didn't. Firstly, the Australian people had confidence that Treasurer Costello would make the right calls. And I think that's something that we've underestimated, is the extent to which confidence is underpinned by a government that knows, that looks like it knows what it's doing. With Wayne Swan, people quite rightly think, look, he's bound to get it wrong. With Peter Costello, people thought, look, I'm not sure what the right answer is, but I've got confidence that he'll know what to do, therefore I'll just get back to running my business. That was the mindset. So that's one of the reasons why Australia continued to perform well and the budget held up during the Asian financial crisis, was because people had confidence that Peter Costello knew what he was doing. The other reason why the budget bottom line held up well during the Asian financial crisis was because we did not embark upon reckless and irresponsible massive fiscal stimulus. We didn't do that. We relied upon the Reserve Bank to adjust interest rates as were required. We left room. We left room for monetary policy to do its job. We left room for monetary policy to do its job. And so I think we demonstrated at that time that when you have an external shock to the economy, it doesn't automatically follow that your revenues are going to plummet, confidence is going to plummet, and the budget's going to go into deficit. So two I think, very contrasting approaches to very contrasting outcomes. So this has been an incredibly unlucky government. But I think you've got to reject that thesis, Mr Acting Deputy President, that the current government is that the hapless victims of global circumstance. They stumble around, things happen beyond their control. They've always got an excuse for not being able to meet their budget forecasts and their budget targets. And that's why I say, Mr Acting Deputy President, that the budget situation, the budget bottom line, really does encapsulate two great truths about this government, their lack of competence and the breach of faith that they continually have with the Australian people. And I say breach of faith because Wayne Swan promised and predicted in budget speech after budget speech that the budget would whir back into surplus, but it's been a diminishing surplus. In the 2011-12 budget, the surplus forecast for 2012-13 was $3.5 billion. That was revised down in the 2012-13 budget to $1.5 billion. As we know, it was revised down again in the MyEFO this year to $1.1 billion. Now, the government will tell you that the overwhelming reason why the budget has been in debt, in deficit, and why there has been debt is because of revenue write-downs. But I've just got to make this point. Revenues are not falling. Revenues are continuing to grow. What is happening is that revenues are not growing as fast as forecast. But be in no doubt, revenues are still growing, but expenditure is growing by more. That is why the budget has been in deficit each and every year of this government. It has not been because of revenue write-downs, it has been because of spending decisions by this government, and the government's own budget papers will tell this story. The way to get the budget back into balance isn't to hope, isn't to pray, isn't to promise. It's to actually manage responsibly, it's to live within your means, it's to stop the reckless spending. If the government do that, then they will be able to meet their commitment and they will go better. They will actually be providing opportunities for Australians.